Having sold over 1 million records in 6 weeks, they're straight in at number 9. Here's Nirvana with Smells Like Teen Spirit.
It was time when the music industry, rock and roll, just needed to be shook up.
This little band from Seattle having the audacity to like break onto TV and be so subversive. It was punk rock.
The UK definitely responded to Nirvana much more before America. You guys were the first with everything. It really is like a second home.
Nirvana brought to Britain the most exciting time in music. They left an incredible legacy to so many bands and so many music fans.
I'd never seen somebody running full pelt and taking a dive onto the drum kit.
We didn't know then. We were sitting in a room with bands who were going to go on and be the biggest band in the world.
If you say to people now that Nirvana played in my pub, they go, aye, right. What happened?
He came on in a medical smock. It was just wonderful rock and roll theatre.
Everybody's talking about grunge. What exactly is it?
They made it all right to be an outsider. They made it all right to not fit in.
A lot happened to Nirvana in a very short period of time, and that can be hard to survive.
The 80s in Britain was all about wealth and affluence and power. Music was very formulaic. You had a lot of Stock Aitken Waterman. Everything was just very shiny and very happy, and there was very little rebellion. I was always one of those people who never felt like they fitted in. And I think a lot of people like myself were seeking something else that was an alternative.
In July of '88, I'm running this little agency, working out of my bedroom in Nottingham. I had no cash, and I was promoting gigs and losing money. Purely by chance, somebody called me up and said, oh, you know, there's these people in Holland and there's these guys in Germany and they're bringing bands to the UK. I wonder if you might be interested in helping them to set up some shows. And I started to develop these relationships with these American artists and the American labels, and I begin to hear about the label Sub Pop.
Sub Pop were an independent record label based in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. They were known for this strain of music that would become known in time as grunge.
They had the likes of Mudhoney, Tad and Soundgarden. I think Sub Pop was probably a reaction to the government and the society that was going on in America at the time, so it was very anti-conservative. It was very much about the spirit of independence, it was about doing it yourself, it was about the spirit of rebellion in a record label.
And one day through the post, I get sent a 7-inch single of Love Buzz, the first Nirvana 7-inch. With a little note, I think you'll like this. I'm about 20 seconds into this record and I think, I don't like this, I love this. This very raw vocal and this real melodic sensibility. And I started petitioning Sub Pop. We've got to get Nirvana over here to tour.
Nirvana came to Britain in 1989. They were touring with Tad, a double headliner sub-pop extravaganza, and also with an opening band called the Catran, who are from Edinburgh in Scotland.
We went and did the tour as sort of first on. It was fantastic. There was Kurt and Chris, and the drummer at that point was Chad Channing. That was the last tour he did with them. Lovely guys.
Yeah, I'd never been to Great Britain, and we got off the plane, and we were in this a different world. You got to be careful which way you look when you cross the street. Whenever I went to London or Manchester or Leeds, Newcastle, I always had a great time there.
They were typical kind of working class lads, very kind of overwhelmed that they were in Britain. There was a British road crew because the record label had no money.
We were in a transit van. Tad and Nirvana were in a slightly more upmarket transit van that had seats in it, but there was a lot of them in it, and a couple of roadies and a driver, so they were pretty cramped, and we were staying in manky flat, having to share beds, dirty sleeping bags, scabby carpets, people's flats, that kind of thing. You know, people were putting us up at some of those gigs. It wasn't hotels, it wasn't glamorous, and it was hard work. We did drink a lot of beer, you know, mess around a lot. But it wasn't that kind of hellraiser sort of thing. It was a bunch of guys who needed to get to bed at some point because they were going to be up and in a van at 7 o'clock the following morning without having had a shower, sick of the sight of each other, in for another day's slog. So it's kind of rock and roll, but not what people think of.
In 1989, I would have been 20. I was hitching around following bands. There was like a real sort of underground little movement of people who were just living that life. A lot were students, a lot were just signing on. The future didn't seem very bright for a lot of young people at the time, so it's like, well, let's make our own fun. It's a way of life, really. Got to the first Nirvana gig, got there for sound check, introduced myself. And me and all my friends be on the guest list for the rest of the tour. They're like, would you like a job selling T-shirts for us? You get paid a T-shirt a night, which is £5. You need to keep the T-shirt or the £5. I thought, well, I'll keep the £5 because that was a lot of money back then. I only had £27 a week to live on the dole. But I'd kept the T-shirts. They're worth 450 quid each now, so...
I remember at Duchess of York and Leeds, pub by day, gig venue by night. It was small but excellent and filthy beyond words.
The Duchess was basically a starting point, you know, for bands coming onto the scene. Tad were the headliners. They were considered to be the better band, and Nirvana were in the middle. I'll be honest, I certainly didn't think that they'd be the band that they turned out to be. This is a really good photo of them loading in, and I think Kurt's in the picture somewhere. It just shows the mundane side of touring with bands.
But it's not like today where they roll up with 3 artists, these bands, and like loads of makeup people and wardrobe and, you know, yoga instructors. It was just like, you know, 3 guys in a band. That was it. Going on stage, you know, what's the story?
We went up there and just did our thing. People were connecting with it right off the bat.
In those days, you know, they were all prepared to, like, just dust down anyway, you know, just to get gigs. And Nirvana went upstairs and they kept everywhere around the dressing room. We had a white leather sofa. The bands used to write their autographs on it. And Kurt slept upon the sofa in my office. In the end, I gave it to the Sheffield Rock Museum, which I thought was quite funny.
It would have normally been the situation that we would have played at the University of London Union, which was the established venue for breaking artists coming from the sort of alternative music world, but they didn't want us. I think they considered that there was something rather undesirable about these noisy and filthy punks. So we ended up at the School of Oriental African Studies.
It was very chaotic. Just constant stage diving, just absolute total chaos.
The stage diving came out of the hardcore scene in the United States. That just followed us from the punk rock scene into the mainstream.
Kurt was coming off the stage, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why don't you let the fire extinguisher off? And his face just like lit up. And he grabs a fire extinguisher and just runs on stage and lets it off. Just like being in charge of like naughty kids, you know. The other side of it is like we were getting paid for it and just getting away with it, you know, so it was all good.
And that was Kurt. He could be so intense, and that's what appeals to so many people. And in the meantime, we would try to have as much fun as possible and just be really silly. Maybe that was just kind of to balance the intensity.
Well, 1989 was a year of flux, and I think it's a revolutionary year in a way. With the Berlin Wall coming down, East Europe changing, and those countries getting out of that oppression they'd had for years, it felt like everything was possible, and in a sense, that's what the music was. There were so many diverse and different scenes all colliding at the same time. The Manchester thing was really massive, so it was the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays. Things were definitely breaking down and changing politically, socially, and musically.
We Conservatives know what we believe, say what we believe, and stand by what we believe.
We'd had a right-wing government in Britain for 10 years at that point. There didn't seem to be any potential end to that. There was a cultural reaction, and you saw that manifest in Britain, specifically in the rave scene and the acid house scene. People were taking matters into their own hands, and you know, the authorities were trying to clamp down on these illegal rave parties. And in a way, the music that came out of Sub Pop and came to the UK was a similarly joyous expression of people's discontent. There was a lot of pent-up frustration and anger, I felt, and people were looking for a way to express that. Between 1989, when they toured the UK for the first time, and when they came back in October 1990, Nirvana had a lineup change. Chad Channing left. Chad was a great drummer, but in Kurt's mind, he was the wrong type of drummer for Nirvana.
I was 21 years old, and the band that I was in was called Scream. We had kind of fallen apart and broken up while we were on the road. I was stranded in Los Angeles with no way to get home. And then I got a phone call from a friend, and I had told him that Scream had broken up, and he said, hey, have you ever heard of Nirvana? And of course I'd heard of Nirvana because everybody loved that album, Bleach. He said, you know, they're looking for a drummer. You should call them.
And so Kurt and I go to the airport, and we pick Dave up, and we found this barn studio place in North Tacoma, and so it was just like, let's play. And then we would just kind of jam, and we knew right away, it just clicked.
Mom and Dad went to a show. They dropped me off at Grandpa Joe's. I kicked and screamed, so please no. Grandma, take me home. Grandma, take me home. Grandma, take me home. Grandma, take me home. Grandma, take me home.
Within a few songs, I just knew. They knew, we knew that this was it. We just had this feel together that sounded like Nirvana. And I think it was maybe about 30 days before we went over to the UK for that tour.
Hey, man! If this bird goes down, this is the safest place to be. I'm gonna be here, and I'm gonna be safe as can be.
I remember bringing a video camera, and it was just to be as silly as possible, putting on this persona that's just it's not the real me.
Welcome to British Airways. Please follow all the rules. You hear me?
as soon as you walked on this plane, I took one gander at you and I saw nothing but trouble.
I joined a band with strangers, these two guys I didn't fucking know, so that I could, like, just kind of experience the adventure and the mystery, not really ever knowing what was going to come next.
Because it says it's like almost 3 in the morning, meaning we've been on this thing for 5 hours.
You never know. Time flies when you're having fun.
20th of October 1990, we picked them up from Heathrow. We brought them into town and they went and stayed at the Dalmatia, which is a guest house in Shepherd's Bush Road.
Russell! God damn it!
It was fairly unremarkable, but the guy that owned the place, George, was very, very accommodating towards musicians.
One day, Nirvana basically knocked on the door and said, "Have you got any rooms?" So I said, "Yeah, OK. How many nights do you need?" So they came in, they had a look, and said, "Yeah, this is fine." Got them upstairs to sign the visitor's book, and that was that. They came in. They said, "Oh, we got all of this stuff." And I said, "Well, OK, I'll stick them in the basement."
There were all three of us, like, crammed into one little room, like the monkeys, you know, and, like, Chris's bed's there, Chris there, and I'm over here. We'd wake up in the morning, there was this nice family that would make us fried toast and beans and bangers, and we'd just sit there drinking tea all morning. It was a massive upgrade from the Scream days. I mean, in Scream, we stayed in squats. We stayed in places where you'd show up and they'd be burning the linens out front because there's a fucking scabies outbreak. And so when I joined Nirvana, to me, that was some Four Seasons shit.
Dave Grohl, he's one of the few people I've met who's always happy. Kurt, he would be sometimes withdrawn. I couldn't pin him down, character-wise. Whereas Chris, because he was Croatian and we're half Croatian, we'd have a bit of a connection.
My favorite time being in Britain was at the Dalmatia house. I'm a Dalmatian. Not the dog with spots, but from Croatia. My parents are both from there. And so I felt right at home. We would walk around and just get lost.
Let's get some tea at the Dome Cafe.
Want some tea?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were broke, but it just felt homey.
I can't get used to the traffic situation.
Well, fuck it, man.
Fuck it, man.
Start driving normally.
I have such fond memories of that time. I mean, we were kids, you know? I was 21, Kurt was maybe 23, Chris was maybe 24. We went down to Kensington Market and just, like, bought as many records and cool leather jackets as we could find.
And there was a kebab place which was open, luckily for us, till 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, it was an extension of their kitchen.
Well, here we are. Doesn't look that much difference when I was last here. This is where the Dalmatia Hotel used to be. And down there, I think that's the bus stop where we did some of the photos the day I interviewed Nirvana here. So I interviewed Nirvana in, I think it was late 1990. I was working at the NME at the time. We turned up at this slightly anonymous hotel, and I think Kurt opened the door. Chris Novoselic did the entire interview laying on his bed, well, with the covers over him, actually, moaning about the English cold which he'd picked up. Dave just pootled around picking up dirty laundry, I think. I mean, we didn't know them. We were sitting in the room with a band who were going to go on and be the biggest band in the world. We talked about sort of where they wanted to go musically, and then we had quite a long, daft conversation about what would be the perfect pet. And Kurt Cobain, I think it was, said, I think a turtle. That would share my character quite well. We came outside and Martin Goodacre, the photographer, did some shots, I think, on the steps with the Dalmatia Hotel sign behind. There's the famous Kurt Cobain shot where he's sort of doing this kind of just looking up at you. And I remember Martin having his camera ready and Kurt wouldn't look up. So Martin is persisting and saying, come on, Kurt, you know, look up. And he didn't look up, and eventually I think Martin said something like, if I promise this is the last photo that we're going to do today and you can go after that, will you look up? And Kurt looked up and just did that. And that's the famous photo.
The first tour that I did with Nirvana in 1990, that to me was my rock and roll fantasy come true.
All we had to do was play the music. That was all that was expected of us, right? No saviors of a generation or spokespeople for a generation. It was about the music.
We were free. We were happy. We were young. We were playing music. People were fucking bouncing around while we played it. And it was great. And you could tell at that point, like, something was happening. The UK definitely responded to Nirvana much more before America. It just seemed to me like you guys were the first with everything. Like, we cut our teeth there. After that tour in the UK, I remember going back to America to those same bars and clubs where we were playing to 99 people, 150 people. It was definitely not like it was in the UK.
The late 80s, I was quite a bit lost. Early 20s, not knowing what direction I was going in. Not dealing with adulthood very well. Would have been on the dole, travelling around. Yeah, just a bit rough and ready.
Tony was my buddy when I first moved up to Nottingham, and we became firm friends. Somewhere down the line, as I would rope in my friends, you know, like, can you help me pick up this band from the airport?
I ended up picking Nirvana up from the airport, 89 I think it was, and it started from there.
Plan for tonight.
I'm not sure how he wound up backstage with fucking makeup and paint all over him, but he became a dear friend. Kurt loved him. We all loved him.
I was a bit of a damaged character, not interacting well sometimes in social scenes and just being a bit weird. And I guess Kurt was accepting of the weirdness and took me under his wing.
He just wound up coming up on stage and dancing one night.
This guy just started dancing on stage and like, well, there you go. And it was like, well, it's kind of fun.
Well, I was just feeding the energy from what was going on stage. Maybe it'd been a bit of Native American dance or just pogoing or just doing something odd. You know, it was just do anything, freestyle, you know. People going, well, you know, that was crap, I could do that. It's like, yeah, that's the whole point of it, you know?
I was absolutely stunned. I was like, wow, where did that come from, you know? Stone Roses had Cressa, Happy Mondays had Bez, we had Tony, you know? And, yeah, he's better than all of those.
Where's Tony?
What I think I want to ask you is about your influences.
I would say the biggest influence I've ever had would be the Beatles, because I listened to the Beatles since I was 5 years old up until I was in 4th grade. And I wanted to see the Beatles, and it was about 1973, and I heard on the radio that they'd been broken up for 3 years, you know, and I was totally devastated.
She gives me everything, very tenderly. Love is my lover brings,
The Beatles were a huge influence when I was young. My mother gave me an electric guitar and a Beatles songbook that I would sit down, play the records, and play along with the chords, you know? And I had no teacher. Like, that was how I learned how to play, was from listening to the Beatles.
Then I was introduced to hard rock, such as Led Zeppelin. I got into that, and it kind of meshed together. Like when I started playing guitar, it kind of intertwined the Beatles' melodic style and hooks with heavy, raunchy guitars, and I would say that's probably how our style started.
I'd like to think that Britain were kind of dear to Kurt and to Nirvana, more so than maybe some other places. This was the place where a lot of Kurt's favourite bands had come from.
We had so much respect and so much love for bands from the UK, like the Vaselines, Raincoats, because we thought like their music was worth being heard by the masses. You know, if you enjoy Nirvana, you might enjoy this.
The Raincoats formed in West London in the late 70s, post-punk era, formed by Gina Birch and a Portuguese musician called Ana da Silva. And Kurt was a big fan. When he first came to London, he went on an odyssey trying to find the Raincoats record because you couldn't get it in the States.
Kurt said how much he respected what we did, and so that was a nice thing. I was completely surprised. Kurt wrote this thing which got faxed to us. The Raincoats recorded some music that has affected me so much that whenever I hear it, I'm reminded of a particular time in my life when I was extremely unhappy, lonely and bored. If it weren't for the luxury of putting on that scratchy copy of the Raincoats' first album, I would have had very few moments of peace. It's very touching. Yeah.
Jesus don't want me for a sunbeam.
The Vaselines were a great band from Glasgow. We're playing really great melodic guitar, indie rock. I mean, Jesus Wants Me for a Sunbeam. It's an amazing song.
Don't expect me to cry.
Kurt was a huge Vaselines fan, and he would talk about the Vaselines in interviews, and Nirvana covered several Vaseline songs.
Nobody liked us and nobody really knew us, so we were just having a night out in Edinburgh, playing a gig, and got to meet Nirvana, who were complete strangers. And Kurt, he liked our music, and it was a moment, you know, that I'll never forget.
Jesus don't want me for a sunbeam, 'cause sunbeams are not made like me. And don't expect me to lie for all the reasons you had to die. Don't ever ask your love of me.
This is a copy of a letter Kurt wrote to me in 1991. It starts with, "Hi, Eugene." We recorded Molly's Lips and Son of a Gun, hopefully to be released in a few months. The Vaselines have been my favourite band for a long while now, and geez, I can't wait to see you all soon. I got evicted from my apartment. I'm living in my car, so I have no address, but here's Chris's phone number for messages. Your pal, Kurt.
When we played the Reading Festival in 1991, I think we were halfway up the bill, playing in the afternoon. But just seeing like 30,000 kids dancing to Nirvana, it was fucking awesome.
But in '91, I got there and managed to blag it in as per usual. I just remember being particularly impressed with the new material. To feel it in the atmosphere, in the crowd, definitely. Yeah, blown away.
They asked me to sing the Vaseline song, Molly's Lips. I've never been on any festival stage in my life, and it was an amazing thrill to sing one of your songs played by this great band. At the end of the show, Chris just came on and smashed his bass. And we thought, right, this is different. I'd never seen somebody walking to the lip of the stage and then running full pelt and taking a dive onto the drum kit. And I was standing next to people in other bands like Mudhoney and Sonic Youth, and they all went, ha-ha, like it was funny. And I went, oh, what's he done? And yeah, I think Kurt dislocated his shoulder and he had a sling for the rest of the day.
After Reading, Kurt sent me a copy of the Nevermind cassette. And so I'd done loads of copies of that. We literally had hundreds and hundreds of like cassettes. And I'd be phoning up magazines and papers in the UK. Everybody just wanted a copy. And there's just this like amazing buzz.
Those songs are so catchy, and you could tell it was a step up in terms of the songcraft that Kurt was summoning up. Within about 6 months, Nirvana were the top of the charts in America. They kicked Michael Jackson off the top of the charts.
You could feel that the energy was changing and that the pace was really picking up. You know, the days of just laying around a bed and breakfast and then loading your equipment into a club to play for some people had passed. At this point, we were now doing interviews and we were going to radio stations.
I was working on The Word, which was a TV programme, and I was booking bands. And I remember sitting in the office, and it was a record label who contacted me, and they said, we've got this band, and they're really exciting, we think they're going to blow up. And just as soon as I listened to the song Smells Like Teen Spirit, it was like, OK, right, you know, we've got a space next Friday, can they do it? Are they available? I want them on the show.
The Word was like the biggest show if you were kind of between the age of like, well, I suppose 12 really, and 30. And just about anyone big in that era from 1990 to 95, we got them on before anybody else.
Meanwhile, here's Nirvana, kicking it up good style, 600,000 copies of their album in the USA, and first time live on TV. See you next week.
It was live and it was uncontrolled. So when Nirvana came on, we were overrunning a bit. And then Kurt Cobain made his famous speech.
I'd like all of you people in this room to know that Courtney Love, the lead singer of the sensational pop group Hole, is the best fuck in the world.
This was their Sex Pistols moment, because musically, culturally, philosophically, they were a dare to people's minds and to their sensibilities.
To me, that was almost like a statement of intent. It was like this little band from Seattle having the audacity to like break onto TV and be so subversive. It was punk rock.
I just made sure that I went right down the front, so I was literally looking up at Kurt. I don't think my feet touched the ground from there on in. Everyone was just bouncing up and down. It was just sensational.
It smells like Teen Spirit. It was probably the first time I'd ever heard someone genuinely scream their songs and what they were singing. His voice was just that raw. It was pure honesty and pure authenticity. They were just dressed like normal folk, and for me that was just an absolute education, and it really kind of impacted how my outlook on music and on life. They made it all right to be an outsider. They made it all right to not fit in. From when I was 12 to when I was 15, I just wanted to be Kurt Cobain. You know, I had all his posters on my wall. Literally every inch of my wall was covered with Kurt Cobain.
It just seemed so strange to be on top of the pops, right? I mean, that was reserved for, like, pop bands. We don't belong there. I think there was a conversation about lip syncing, which we had never done, and, you know, felt uncomfortable doing it. And they said, okay, well, we'll let the vocals be live, but the music has to be pre-recorded. I mean, you know, they were just asking for it.
Load up on drugs, kill your friends as far as to.
He sang in this ridiculous voice. We're all with our mouths wide open going, what the hell is this?
The audience, some of them may have been fans and knew what to do, and then there was this other faction that was just like trying to, you know, dance to it. Just a weird environment where everyone's like, what the fuck is going on right now?
Top of the Pops back then was like the biggest TV music show you could possibly be on. This was their big, big moment, and he completely sabotaged it.
Nirvana had a sense of humour. They weren't miserable bastards all the time. It was very slapstick and very, you know, like Monty Python. If they're going to do something like that, they were going to do it their own way. And it worked for them because it created legend and it created myth.
In late '91, Nirvana played a gig in Edinburgh at the Carlton Studios, and then afterwards they went to a bar called the Southern. And this night, Kurt and Dave did an acoustic set in this rough and ready boozer. I wish to God I'd been there, because it must have been unbelievable.
Well, it has changed a bit, but still the same building.
Ah, it's trying to place where everything was, because there was a raised stage up there and stuff like that. Looks cleaner than it did.
It was primarily a biker bar. So there was always a line of bikes parked outside on the street there. It would be rammed, and it'd be really noisy. Dunsey and I were in a band called the Joyriders, and I knew Nirvana from being the previous band that had supported them on tour, the first UK tour. We were doing a charity gig for the Sick Kids Hospital in here. My brother was their tour manager, and we knew they had a night off, so we kind of asked if they'd do it. They said yes.
It started getting really busy in the sort of middle of the afternoon, because obviously word had got around
I remember it filling up and thinking, this is kind of spiralling out of control.
The place was rammed. There was, what, about 200, 300 people in here?
As we went on and played longer...
And longer.
And longer. People started leaving. There was shouts from the audience of, where are they?
Did anybody ever see Nirvana? I think they might be coming along soon.
I think people were really gobsmacked when David and Kurt showed up at the door.
I said to Murdo, I think we'll survive this. I think we'll survive this. So, I mean, the vast majority of people who had been here during the day had left, so there was maybe only 30 people left when the band actually turned up.
But if you were to do a straw poll in Edinburgh, you'd probably meet about like 500, 600 people who will tell you that they were at the gig, so, who weren't.
So most of you may have realized Dave is not Chris. Dave plays drums. He doesn't know how to play bass.
We just sat on these bar stools and played some music. I felt completely comfortable doing that, maybe more so than anything else we were doing at the time, like playing on top of the pops, you know, that just seemed a little more natural to me.
To see them with pints, strumming acoustic guitars, just being really relaxed and having a bit of a blether with people, it felt really special.
They played and then they hung around, shut the curtains, and then we just stayed for most of the night. Yeah.
And then I sat at the bar and someone gave me a lesson in whiskey that went on for a long time.
If you say to people now that, you know, Nirvana played in my pub, they go, aye, right, go the other one, you know. Well, it happened.
What everyone does know about Seattle now is its music, which sounds like the illegitimate offspring of punk and thrash metal and looks like the result of a nasty accident in an Oxfam shop. Grunge.
I wasn't really plugged into the mainstream world, so I never thought that we would have anything to do with it because we were kind of weird. And then, yeah, the next thing we know, we're just really, really popular.
Everybody's talking about grunge at the moment. What exactly is it?
Okay, it's against the commercialization of the 80s, and it's very anti-fashion. It's got to be dark and preferably faded. Flannel shirt like that, perhaps, over there, which you actually put around your waist, and you don't actually wear it as a shirt, just as something to cover your bottom, really.
It doesn't matter if your jumper's got holes in it. You can recycle clothes, and you can wear just like the scruffiest things. Oh my God, as a scruffy kid throughout my life, that completely appealed to me. It really did.
The people who were close to the music never really took any of that stuff seriously at all. Once you start having £5,000 check shirts being worn by models in New York fashion shows, you know, the shark has been well and truly jumped.
You have to remember how bizarre it was that Nirvana became so omnipresent and so culturally important because they were the first band, in my mind, to do that, to actually be so visceral, to be so cathartic, and to actually break through into a mainstream crowd. And Nirvana almost re-qualified what pop music could be at that point. It's also, I think, very important to remember that rock music, especially at that point, was so macho. It was kind of seen as a boys' club, and Kurt Cobain had no interest in furthering that mindset. Like, what was all this kind of misogynistic kind of take on playing rock music?
You know, it was time when the music industry, rock and roll, just needed to be shook up. You know, there was Aerosmith and this kind of a hair metal scene that was that archetype, right? And then when Nirvana, we had facial hair and we had grubby clothes, but we had a very feminine sensibility, right? And that's how things changed.
Kurt was a pro-feminist person, and he was anti homophobic. He actually said, if you're homophobic or don't respect women and so forth, don't come to our gigs, don't buy our records. Saying something like that has a really big impact. And that's one of the legacies, I think, that he's left.
Kurt was really intense. So he could be incredibly sweet, but he could also spit venom. Kurt really cared a lot about people, and it was a gift, but maybe that weighed on him some, right?
As he started to explode on a global scale, it was like being in the eye of a hurricane. Normality in the center, everything else crazy.
I think we all sort of processed it and dealt with it and did it in our own ways. And, you know, as the drummer of the band, I really was, like, practically anonymous. I was kind of relieved of a lot of that pressure of the success. I really can't speak for Kurt's experience, but, I mean, it seems pretty clear that his experience was a bit more complicated than Chris and I's.
By summer 1992, the tabloids were feeding on every bit of Nirvana's gossip, rumour that they could find. So there was a rather fevered atmosphere that was building up in advance of Nirvana's headlining appearance at Reading in 1992. There was loads of rumours that the band were going to split up, and there was lots of talk that they were going to cancel Reading.
Everywhere you went, people just said, "Are Nirvana playing? We've heard they're not playing. Where's Kurt?" And it was just non-stop.
This is Little John Farm in Reading, the site of the Reading Festival for eons. It's very strange trying to get your bearings. Yeah, I'm guessing that the main stage was roughly over here. August bank holiday, 1992, Sunday. The energy was palpable. Sea of people, as far as you could see, really.
On the night, Kurt just masterfully sent up all the scare stories. He came on in a medical smock. He was wheeled on stage by Everett True, the Melody-Maker journalist.
With the support of his friends and family, he's gonna make it.
I remember standing side stage, giggling, just hysterically.
Some say love, it is a river.
That was his kind of like fuck you to everybody.
It was just wonderful rock and roll theatre.
I definitely felt like we had to prove ourselves. And at the time, I didn't really feel entirely confident that we could do that. We hadn't really been playing very much at all. And I think we maybe rehearsed once, twice, maybe.
I think every amount of frustration and anger that they had felt over the last few months was channeled into that show.
And And everyone's singing every word to Breed, and every word to Teen Spirit, every word to Lithium.
I'm so happy, 'cause today I found my friends. You're in my head. I'm so ugly, that's okay, 'cause so are you.
It really was a triumphant return in a time where I'm not sure even we knew we could do it. I just remember being so fucking relieved that we didn't train wreck in front of everybody. I was very happy.
I remember it being a little bit ramshackled, but that's punk rock, innit? At the end of the night, I just overdid it. Just too much head banging, and yeah, I had to wear a neck collar for a few days, give myself whiplash. Them giving me the opportunity to do this has got me through dark times of feeling depressed and worthless, and I just think, well, hold on a minute, you've done this. You can die happy having contributed to this mythological show.
What else could I be? All apologies.
It's bittersweet, 92, you know, it was the last time I saw Kurt.
Reading 92 had a huge significance or relevance in the timeline of the band. Emotionally, it was huge. And unfortunately, this is the last time we ever played the UK.
Nirvana were meant to tour the UK in spring '94, but by that point things were already looking very grave indeed. There had been an overdose in Rome, the tour was cancelled, things were really, really serious at this point.
Even though Kurt was really talkative, it just wasn't the same energy. The crew and everything was flat. It just wasn't the same. It was kind of obvious he had a bit of a drug problem back then. He was just really uncomfortable.
A lot happened to Nirvana in a very short period of time. Those few years between headlining Reading 1992 and canceling that 1994 tour, it was kind of like being shaken from side to side and just holding on, trying to keep from sinking. And so, in a way, that was us saying, no, this is not going to happen right now. We need to take care of some other shit.
Nowadays, depression is, everybody talks about it more openly. Got to look after people. That person's struggling a bit, we better go and help them. That didn't happen then, did it?
Society used to be all about just coping and getting on with it, and you'll all be okay. There was so much bravado, and it never felt like it was the right thing to do, to put your hand up and just go, God, I'm struggling here.
From 1991 to 1994, when I think about that period, it feels like it was 10 years. It was really intense, just from the attention. Those are these personal things that I'm still trying to get a grip on. And we just wanted to make music.
It wasn't until late Thursday night, early Friday morning that people in Britain found out the news.
The lead singer of the rock band Nirvana, Kurt Cobain, has been found dead at his home in the United States. Police say it looks as if he shot himself. He was 27 years old.
I remember coming down to breakfast and just everyone was talking about, have you heard that Kurt Cobain's dead? Whatever you thought about his mindset at the time, it was still such a shock. It was so sad.
I think one of the things we always kind of back of our mind is like, what happened? What went wrong?
Yeah, it was extremely upsetting. Just crying for 3 or 4 days.
I remember running straight upstairs to tell my mum and dad that Kurt Cobain had died because it was on the news. I remember it was the first time I cried about losing something or someone. It felt like someone you knew.
I'm still processing Kurt's death, you know? Because I have to explain it to my kids who love Nirvana. Because for the longest time, you know, I would try to process and talk about it with friends and family and things like that. And they would help me. But now, like, I feel like I have to help my kids go through it. It's a lifetime of healing.
It must have been over 10 years before I listened to Nirvana again. I'd hear tracks every so often, but most times if they ever come on, I try to listen to them, but I just find it difficult.
I think all of us flailed around for a few years, and through the sort of the rest of the 90s, it was a very, very tough time personally and emotionally, and there wasn't any real closure on it.
It's been 30 years, but coming back to the UK, it really is like a second home. Anton Brooks, Russell Warby. I still work with most of those people. Whenever the Foo Fighters come back for shows, like, we get together like it's a family reunion. So there's a bond that is like a forever thing between all of us.
To this day, I'll get fan letters, or I meet people, like in the public, and they'll say, Nirvana got me through a really bad time. Or, once I heard Nirvana, I kind of felt better about things. And I'm so grateful that people are connecting that way still with Nirvana, because that's the way I feel about music.